Welcome! In this video we will look at more advanced CGI web applications with the PowerBasic Console Compiler. In our last Console Compiler video we showed a fairly basic CGI program which all it did when the link was clicked was to display a piece of text on a web page. What we're going to do today is we're going to put a query option onto this screen. The index.html file will allow the user to key in a value, will provide the user with a button, and the button, when clicked, will execute a second CGI application. So let's have a look at the code. This is our index.html file at the moment. All it has in it is a single call to our test application on a link. We're going to add some more to this page. Now what we'll do first of all, we will put a paragraph tag around this initial link to give it a little more space on screen. And then what we're going to put in after is the query option. We're going to make use of a text file we generated in earlier videos that displays a list of people with their eye colour and their blood type, and we're going to be querying that file on the web server to pull back matches of a particular eye colour. So on the web page itself we are going to need an input box. We'll make this one a mere 20 characters in size, and we'll give it a name and an ID. And we'll give it a current value of blank. Now what we want to do here, we want to provide a button for the user to actually click on this, but just in case the user happens to hit the return button on the keyboard, we'll pick that up as well. Right, now that will handle the key press if someone presses the return button, the enter button, while inside the text box that we have named search data. Now we also need to add a button onto the screen that the user can actually click. And we'll give this button an ID and a name. And we'll call this one search data. And for this we'll need an event to pick up the click event. And we're going to call a function called searchDataDB. Now I know our text file isn't really a database, but we're behaving as though it is. Now we're going to be using a technique called Ajax, Asynchronous Java. And this one, what we'll be defining next is a div rule, which we'll give a name, and this is the area on the HTML page that we're actually going to put the data into. So initially when this page shows, the button will appear on screen underneath the text box, and a piece of text will appear underneath that saying data will appear here. And the plan is when the button is actually clicked, we will call a function whose job it is to actually execute the CGI application on the web server, and that will search out our data and pass it back to the web page which we are currently in. So what we will need to do at the top of our code is we'll need to put the function in, which basically is the searchDataDB. Now to save a bit of time I'm just going to paste this one in. Now since this is part of a script function, for those of you who have done JavaScript before, we'll obviously need a script tag and an end script tag after that. Right, there we go. Now I'll explain what this is actually doing. Once the user actually presses the button by clicking on it, or if they press the return or enter key inside the text box, then the search data DB function will be called. And this is our search data DB function here. Now what this will do, this will pick up from the document the element which has the ID of search data. Now if you look down here, our input text box has the value search data. So that's its ID, so we're going to pick up the value that's currently sitting within that text box. And we're going to put that value into the variable chosen. Now having got that, we're going to call another function which we haven't defined yet, but we will in a moment. This is going to execute something inside the CGI bin folder, and the program it's going to kick off is one again we haven't written yet, called pb CGI sub show data results.exe. Now it's going to be passing two parameters. It's going to be passing the first parameter, which we're calling it t, and we're using the math random. And the reason we're passing a random number as the first element of this is to save the web server actually caching the results, and because it thinks you're calling the same thing exactly the same twice, it may not return the values you want. But always putting a random number at the beginning means it will always think this is a unique call. And our second parameter, the n parameter, is going to be the value that you have actually keyed in to the text box, what you've chosen basically. Now what this is doing next is it's passing a third parameter to the load dynamic function, which is this function here. Now what this function does is basically it picks up the ready state from our call, and it is looking for the value that we have actually put in here, the data div. So our data div in there is going to be the data div which we are going to be updating the text for. So anything between the div and div end is going to be replaced by what our application, our CGI application, actually generates. This is a very neat way of actually slotting back into that section of the HTML page the information gained from any CGI application we have running. So all we need now is to put into the load dynamic request function. Now this is a generic function you can reuse in many different things that use Ajax. This one here is a fairly straightforward function. It will handle code going all the way back to IE5 and IE6. Hopefully nobody is still using those old browsers now. But anything from IE7 onwards for Firefox, Chrome, Opera, or Safari uses this line of code. Anything as old as IE6 or IE5, you need to use an ActiveX object. But the trick with this is when the button is clicked, our CGI application will be invoked. It will be given two parameters, for which we will ignore the first parameter, but the second parameter will be what we're actually looking for. We will then query our database, and the results that are returned will be slotted in to the data div on the HTML page, so they will appear in here. Now, since we're going to be returning a fair bit of information, we'll return it basically as a table. So we just save this. That's our HTML complete. What we need to do now is to create our new application. This one here. So we go back to our code. We want to create a new CGI application, but it's going to be fairly similar to the one we've already done. So let's create a new one. Blank this out for the moment, and we will save that one. As a name. So if we copy everything we have in here at the moment and just paste it in, and then we'll look to see what we have to change. Because this is going to be using the CGI include file exactly as the previous one did, And we're also going to make use of the file handling routines library too. We can then look at the parameters we're getting back. Now we know in this particular case we're getting 2 parameters back. Now in the previous demonstration we were only handling 1 parameter. We need to handle 2 parameters now. So our first parameter is basically returning a random number which we want to ignore. However, the second parameter we're very much interested in. Now how this named parameter will actually come in, the string will come in as n equals and then whatever value the user's actually keyed on screen. Which is fine, but we're interested in the n. We know this is the second parameter. So what we want to do is we want to trim off the n. So we'll be using the parse command to take the string as it stands, which is this. We're using the equals as the delimiter, and we're taking the second element. So this would have been the first element, and this is the second element, which is exactly what we're after. And then having got that, what we need to do next, we don't need these lines down here. What we need in here is we need to return our HTML section. So we'll use the routine that's in our CGI library to write back to the CGI. It's going to write back a section of HTML. So all we have to do now is to write this new function. Now in previous videos we created a mylarge file.txt file containing all the data we want, so we're going to be making use of this. So that's the file we're going to be reading. We're going to use a local variable to return our HTML. And just in case there are spaces either trailing at the end or at the beginning of the string which the user actually keyed, we'll use the trim command to actually trim them off. Now there's a function in our library which we defined at the beginning, the file handling routines, which we're going to call here, and this is going to read our entire file here into an array. So first of all we'll need an array to actually put it in, and this function returns either true or false. So if the function returns true, we can proceed. And if not, we'll take alternative action. Now, our library function actually takes 2 parameters. The file name as the first parameter, which we've already set up, and it also takes in, by reference, the array. So if the data can't be loaded, for some reason we can't actually get any data back at all, then all we'll have to do is we'll populate our return value with a nice little paragraph, and at the very end we return the string. Now if the data has been loaded, we can then attempt to actually search out what we're looking for. So since we want to return this information in a table, first thing to do is to create the table tag, and we'll give that a border. Now, there may be one or many records returned by a query, so we'll want to read through the array and pick up each of the values. So we'll want a local variable to actually do that. And we're going to use the ubound command, which, as you remember from the array video, is used to work out what the upper bounding of a dimension of an array is. Now this particular array is a single dimension, so this will give us the top of the array. So if it returns 100 records, ubound will return 100. So for each element, we want to pick up the value in the element. And we're going to put that value into a variable called strdata as a string. And having got that, the first row that's actually read are the header titles. So we'll want to handle them slightly differently. So where long R equals 0, it's the header line. And what we're doing in here, since we want to display values in a table format, the file we're reading is tab separated. So we can basically replace the tabs with the beginning and ending of a cell in a table. So we're going to use the replace command. What that does is every iteration of a tab will be replaced by the closing cell and the opening cell. That handles the majority of our data. Then all we have to do is to handle the beginning and the end. So we're adding to our HTML variable, and we need to add basically a row start for the table, a cell start, and then add on the strdata, which will contain all the data with the ending and beginning of cell tags in it. And at the very end, we'll put in a close for both the cell and for the row. Right, that handles our header line. Now for all the other data lines. And we're looking specifically for eye color. Now we know our strdata contains the entire data row. And what we're specifically after is just the eye color one. Now I know the eye color appears in the 5th column. So since we know it's tab delimited, we're giving the whole line into the parse command saying use a delimiter of a tab and pick the 5th element, which just so happens to be the eye color. Now just in case there are any reading or trailing spaces in the data, which there shouldn't be, but it's always good to be careful, we'll put a trim command in so we know exactly what we've got. Now we need to compare this eye color that we've got back from the data to the information that we've been passed into the parameter. So let's just put that in as a string. So we need to do a test now. And we'll need to dimension that up here. So if we do find a match by comparing these, we'll have to make sure that we're doing this as a case dependent match. So just in case the user keys in something that is lowercase or uppercase, we will force the comparison to test in lowercase. This means it doesn't matter how the user actually keys it in, our comparison will be done quite successfully. Now, if this does match, then the eye color matches. So we'll need to return the value. So exactly the same as we did up here. That line of code will actually work quite nicely. Now, that's fine for the basics. That's going to give us a table back. Now, we may want to go a little further than that. We may want to tell the user how many records we actually got. So what we can do, since we're returning the table details, before we actually return the table, we can return a piece of text in a paragraph. And we know what the user keyed in. Now we'll want to put out the number of records actually found. Now what we can do is, in here we know if a record has been found. So we'll want to increment some kind of counter. Basically just add 1 to it. And we'll declare this up here as a long. And then we can put down here, since the counter is a numeric value and we're building a string here, we'll use the format command to wrap around it to turn it into a string. So what this will do is it will, once the search has been done, it will put a bit of text into the HTML saying data search for where eye color equals, for example, blue, returned X number of records. So if we try compiling that, what have we missed? Oh yes, we didn't fold the line round. Right, that compiles quite cleanly. Okay, we're going to take that file and we're going to copy it into our server, into our CGI bin. So here we are on our COD 002 server. We have our large text file in place to read, and we just have to take the application we have just compiled, drag it in, and there it is. So if we go onto our website now, and we'll refresh this, there we now have the text box to allow the eye color to be keyed in, and we have a button to press to search the data. So key in blue and hit the search button. We get a list of data coming back with the eye color, telling us we have 163 records and detailing the records in a reasonably formatted table. Now we can go a little further than this and make it a little more presentable. In order to do that, we are going to make use of the Cascading style sheet, which we prepared in a previous video. In here, when we're setting up the beginning of the table, what we want to do is we want to put in a class command, like so. And if we compile this, and we will copy in our updated CGI application. And if we run this now, we now have a coloured header to the table, which is better. Also, what we want to do, we want to band each of these alternate rows, which again is very easy to do using our Cascading style sheets. Further down here, we're actually setting up the rows themselves. One thing we can do, we can create a little custom function whose job it is to work out what colour each of the alternate rows is going to be. So we'll call this function fun banding, and we will create this little function down here, and this will return a string. Now we're going to make use of the static command in here. Now normally in functions, when you declare local variables, when you call the function once, anything set up in the variables is lost when you leave that function and return for a second time. However, using the static type of variable, it means that the function will retain the value that's been put into a particular variable. So when you return time and time again, it will still have the value it had at the last time, which is really quite useful for what we're trying to do here. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be testing the value of our long value variable, and if it's equal to 1, which it won't be for the first time since it's a numeric variable, its initial value will be 0. Then if it is 0 the first time round, we're going to return this class. Otherwise, we're going to be returning the even class. And as soon as we've done that, we then just change the value so that each alternate call, it will be a different value. There we go, this simple addition of the code. If we compile that, oh, missed out an equals. There we go. And we copy our updated program in place. Again, these are very small programs that execute very quickly. Ideal for CGI applications. If we refresh that now, and there we have banding. So we keep doing something that doesn't exist, we will get 0 records coming back. So just pressing the enter key as I did there will do exactly the same as clicking on the search button, and this pulls back any information you want. The beauty of this technique is, of course, you could pass several variables, and the data at the back end could be doing anything. It could be querying a database, reading a text file as we have now, querying some other facility on the system, but ideal for a basic CGI program. So what we've done today is we've created an HTML page which, when run, displays a basic text box, gives you the option of keying a value in and hitting a button. Pressing the button will actually kick off an executable on the web server itself, which will then run, pull the data back, and return the data to the web page you are currently in. Now, the beauty of doing things this way is that multiple people could be running this all at the same time, and each time the button is clicked, then a new instance of the executable will be kicked off on the server, run to completion, and then exit. These applications are very small, and you can run quite a number of them on the web server. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.